Good evening, everyone. Happy to be with you again this evening. This evening I want to talk about this idea. It seems like the central theme that we talk about all the time of non-clinging, and particularly the phrase we use, letting go. And we talk about it all the time. It seems to be pretty central to, at least from the Theravada Buddhist perspective, the whole path. And in fact, the first noble truth of the Four Noble Truths is the fact of the suffering that comes through clinging. And then it's all about ending the clinging, either not clinging or when there is clinging, letting it go. And so I wanted to say a few things just about, we probably all have a good sense of what we mean by letting go, but I want to say a few things and then share a few things that have been helpful in helping me around this idea of letting go, and see if some of those might be useful for you. We just want to be clear, when we talk about letting go, and from a Dharma perspective, it's really talking about letting go of everything. Well, what does that mean to let go of everything? Because it's not actually true. What it really is talking about is letting go of everything that leads us into suffering. But it doesn't really mean letting go of everything, so we need to be clear about that. It's certainly not talking about letting go of any ideas of say, around morality and the idea that we should live in a way that does not create suffering for others and for ourselves, and that promotes well-being and happiness and liberation for ourselves and for others. So we don't want to let go of that. We want to aim ourselves in that direction. We want to continue to act in ways wisely, out of using wise discernment, out of ways that take care of ourselves and take care of those around us. We don't want to let go of that. So we're not talking about anything like that. It's attitudes within ourselves that create suffering. It's a particular kind of letting go. And I want to read something from Ajahn Sumedho. Just one moment. Okay, this is Ajahn Sumedho. The practice of letting go is very effective for minds obsessed by compulsive thinking. You simplify your meditation practice down to just two words, letting go, rather than try to develop this practice and then develop that, and achieve this and go into that, and understand this and read the suttas and study the Abhidhamma, and then learn Pali and Sanskrit, and then the Madhyamaka and the Prajnaparamita, get ordinations in the Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana, write books, and become a world-renowned authority on Buddhism. Instead of becoming the world's expert on Buddhism and being invited to great international Buddhist conferences, just let go, let go, let go. I did nothing but this for about 2 years. Every time I tried to understand or figure things out, I'd say, let go, until the desire would fade out. So I'm making it very simple for you to save you from getting caught in incredible amounts of suffering. There's nothing more sorrowful than having to attend international Buddhist conferences. Some of you might have the desire to become the Buddha of the age, Maitreya, radiating love throughout the world. But instead I suggest being an earthworm, letting go of the desire to radiate love throughout the world. Just be an earthworm who knows only two words, let go, let go, let go. You see, ours is the lesser vehicle, the Hinayana, so we only have these simple, poverty-stricken practices. So I like that. Of course, he's trying to be funny there, but I think he really does cut to an essence of something. But even in the way he's speaking, for example, he says, even letting go of the desire to radiate love. I actually think we should hold on to the desire to radiate love, but do it with a mind of letting go. That's an interesting place for each of us to explore. What is our motivation for doing anything? What is the impulse to do anything? If it's coming from a place of profoundly letting go. in my own experience and from talking with many other people, I have found that when people are more caught in fixed views, fixed identities, fixed ideas of things, oftentimes, first of all, it can cut off many possibilities. And it reminds me of, for those of you who know Suzuki Roshi's book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. It's got to still be in print. It's an old book, but it's a classic. And he has a wonderful phrase in there where he said, in the mind of the beginner, there are many possibilities. In the mind of the expert, there are few. And so he's pointing to the same feeling around this non-clinging or letting go. He uses more of this idea of beginner's mind. It's just letting go or not coming from our own set view of things and opening to meet life more in its own terms. That's the way I hold this. And then depending on what life gives us, we have to make choices, but we want to come out of wisdom, wise action, and not out of a reactivity. So all of this is pointing to this idea, the way I like to hold it and the way I understand it, of what we mean by letting go. So we could talk a lot more, and we can when we open it up for discussion in a few minutes, around what we really mean by letting go. But I'd like to shift, just let that be this idea of what letting go is, and shift more into what I have found has helped me. And I'll just offer a few things. First of all, by definition, until we're all Buddhas ourselves, in our tradition, we all have greed, hatred, and delusion, or certainly the potential, the seeds are there when the right causes and conditions come together for them to sprout. And so that's not doing anything wrong. It just means we're human beings. And again, using the model in Theravada Buddhism, your mind is not completely liberated from these forces until you reach the end of the path, whatever that may be. So we have to realize that we have all of our motivations are going to be mixed, all the impulses in there. And I think, or at least have the potential. So hopefully, as much as possible, we make choices that aren't driven by delusion or ill will, or chasing after something. We use the euphemism greed. All of these forces that can impel us forward. However, when those forces are there, and they are going to come up for all of us, this is the place where we can bring in the letting go. We don't need to let go if we're resting in the stream of non-clinging. You're already in a, how would we say it, a harmonious relationship with things, with life, with yourself, with others. So the first thing that I found really for myself was essential is we have to know what's happening. And there are two terms that you'll hear that go closely together. What's called mindfulness, and another one called clear comprehension. Mindfulness, for those of you, if you hear the Pali, it's sati, S-A-T-I. And clear comprehension, which is not exactly the same thing, but it's close, is called sampajanya, and it's translated as clear comprehension to clearly know what's happening. The Pali word sati, that we translate as mindfulness, really the root meaning of that is remembering. And so the simple way I like to hold that is, some of you have heard me say this because I say it all the time, but I think it really captures the essence. It just means not being lost on automatic pilot. We're caught up in things. And sometimes you will hear people say, if you lose your mindfulness, people will say, oh, that person, they kind of went unconscious, which is a fine way of speaking, and we know what they mean. But of course, you're not unconscious. You're conscious, but you're just lost, caught in things. And so there's a difference when speaking in that way of being unconscious, when you kind of wake up and you know what's happening in the moment. You can be angry and be caught up in it and reacting and responding out of it. And that is a very different experience than knowing you're angry. You're still angry. There's still anger there if you want to speak it using passive voice verbs, that's fine. But at least we have the choice to then bring in the clear knowing of what's going on, the clear comprehension. We have to actually have the mindful wakefulness to be able to make these choices. And so to me, that's in whatever way we're speaking of any aspects of Dharma, that's foundational. Because just using the example that I often use, it's being a little humorous, but we ask people when we're giving meditation instructions, and we'll say, well, what's the meditation instruction when you've been lost in thought and daydreaming and you've completely forgotten to be with the breath or whatever meditation practice you're engaged in? And people will answer, well, the instruction is to come back. But of course, it's a trick question, because when you're lost, there is no instruction, because you don't even know you're gone. And it's only when you've come back and you've kind of woken up and you realize, oh, I've been lost, I'm back now, then the instruction can kick in. You can make a choice. And similarly, when we're just entangled or lost or caught up in things, we don't have the ability to make a conscious choice around letting go or not. And so we are going to respond to any situation according just to the habitual tendencies in our minds. Now, hopefully, either just because it's the way we naturally are, or if we've, through different practices, maybe have purposely developed what we call wholesome qualities in our minds, that even when we're lost on automatic pilot, we've got a better chance of naturally responding in a better way, for sure. But it's still going to come out in a habitual unconscious response. If we mindfully know what's happening, then we've got the potential for making a choice. So that's the starting point there. And then sometimes what I have found is just that waking up to know what's happening. And then the sampajanya, that clear knowing, a clear awareness of what's going on. It's not only the remembering to come back of the mindfulness, but then I know what's happening. Oh, I'm angry, or reactivity, or ill will, or greedy mind, or whatever it is. Then I have a choice point. But I have to be willing to make the choice. I have to be willing to show up. Again, from a Dharma perspective, around those things that create suffering, if we really want to take the Dharma to heart and take it really as far as we can, it's asking us to let go of everything. Again, you still can choose a response, but you want to make your best choice on what is a wise response. And so sometimes the energy of something will pull us in certain directions in which it may not be easy to want to let go of something. There's something compelling that's, even though we know we've got the mindfulness and the clear comprehension, but then we bring the awareness to the next step. Okay, let's let go. Sometimes just shining the light of awareness the light of mindfulness is enough. And whatever's happening, that the letting go happens. It self-liberates in a sense. And that's all that's needed. And I'm sure all of you have seen many times like that. So we can be appreciative of those times. However, there are other times when it's not enough, right? We all know this. And more is needed if, in fact, we really do want to actualize the mind of letting go, actualize the mind of non-clinging. Then we have to then look and see what happened. Oh, okay, I'm aware of what's happening. It's harder to let go. It's not happening. What can I do to support me? Well, a few things about this. One is that if there's some kind of unease, dis-ease, stress, if you want to say suffering, when we're constricted, contracted, reactive in some way, sometimes we can just hang out with the feeling of that. Maybe it's like a little bit of a suffering or a stress. It certainly maybe doesn't feel good to be in this place. Maybe if we're annoyed, say, for example, whatever. It's not like it's a bad to be annoyed, but it's just an example that came to mind. We all have times we can get annoyed, so it's an easy one to think of. And then we notice, well, what would it mean to let go in my mind? Maybe we hang out with the feeling of being annoyed. How does it feel? Well, annoyance probably, we're all different, but for me, that particular example, it's not the worst thing. You can hang out with it. Sometimes there can be a satisfaction of being right and clinging to the rightness of our view, and that person shouldn't have done this, and I'm right, and there we go, we've spun out again. So these things certainly can happen to all of us. But what I found often is to hang out with the suffering quality of something. And there's an example that Ajahn Chah used that I like. He said, if someone was holding a hot coal in their hand, you would not have to tell them to drop it, right? It's burning, there's a hot coal on fire. You would automatically just drop it. But sometimes when we're holding on to whatever it is, and there's the suffering and the burning of suffering, right? We're still holding on. Either we haven't really connected with the suffering of it, or we're just caught, we haven't found the way. And so sometimes just paying attention to the suffering of the situation can help us to at least incline the mind in the direction of letting go. The second thing is well, I'm pausing here because I realize that as I'm talking about letting go, I hope this doesn't sound too odd, but I want to tell you, I actually don't know how to let go or how to tell someone to let go. I don't. How does it happen in the mind that we can do it? We all know that we've had times when we have let go. We know the feeling of letting go of something in our minds. How did that happen? And what's different from that than other times when we know it, we see it, we've been here 100 times, 1,000 times, but something's not ready to let go yet? If we really find that, then we need to back up. This is what I find can be helpful. And turn, now what's not important is whatever, using the example of annoyance, what the person did or what happened. But now I'm more engaged with if it's more important to me to actually let go. Then I'm less concerned about holding on to my annoyance, and I'm more interested in the letting go. And if all of these things aren't working, then I found what helps me is to get more interested in that and actually turn towards that. Like, well, what's going on here? And you don't have to make a big project of it. I'm saying a lot about it, but it can just be a felt sense of feeling into, okay, this is the place, this is what it's like in a place that either doesn't want to or has not found the way. We don't want to be beating ourselves up and judging ourselves. It's just what's going on. We hold ourselves with kindness. Hopefully we try. Hold ourselves with love, with self-empathy, just like hopefully you would a dear friend or anyone you cared about. But just to be with, but this is what's happening now. The mind's, it's not letting go or doesn't want to. Maybe, if the answer for you is, I don't want to let go, that's an honest answer. That is a genuine response. And so that can be a place then to hang out. And then you may try some other things. If you still don't want to give up just because you don't want to, because I want to tell you, if you haven't figured out, I'm guessing you mostly know what I'm about to say, but if you haven't, let me tell you that if you let your opinion guide and make the choices for you, let's just say it's not always going to lead you in the best direction. So I have found many times it's been more helpful to stay attuned with my intention of how I want to be. Say if I have an intention to really actualize and live in an authentic stream of non-clinging, sometimes then I need to touch back into that strong intention as, say, an antidote, or not necessarily, or a support and an ally to come and help me, is maybe the way I'd like to think about it. for the times when I don't want to. And let me tell you, I've gotten a lot of, I'm not going to go into politics today at all, except to say those of you who've been listening to my Dharma talks for the last 3.5 years know that I've spoken often about my own learning edge around certain individuals whom I shall not name, for whom it's been challenging for me to let go and live in a heart when my heart's not closed off. But I've actually liked to use those as great learning opportunities, and I bring that in only because if you have, say, people or situations like that in your life, they really are a great place, because then you get to hang out with, I don't know if I can do this, and not only that, I don't even know if I want to do this with this person or situation. That's a great place to hang out if our deeper commitment is enlightenment, liberation, awakening, and to actually have our inner place of our inner state of love and non-clinging not being dependent on external circumstances. Coming back to the intention can be very helpful then. And then we see what happens. So what you have to do the experiment yourself. What happens when I really consciously turn back to my intention now, in the face of, hopefully when you're training, you don't pick the worst situation. You know, they often say when people are doing traditional loving kindness or compassion practices, if you go to some of the retreats in some of the scenes that Spirit Rock and other centers like that, and the typical way they'll talk about is, if you want to develop a kind heart, they'll typically say, well, don't pick someone for whom it's easy to have the feelings of loving kindness. Work with that, develop it, then maybe move to someone who's a little more neutral for you, not so reactive. And then later, when you feel like you've kind of worked that strengthened that muscle of love, then what is it like when you turn towards something more difficult? And there's a lot more strategies than that, but actually, but sometimes we don't have. So that's great. Sometimes we don't have the. So that's a good way to work on non-clinging and letting go, for sure. On little stuff. Sometimes little stuff can feel like big stuff. I understand that, but don't pick the biggest thing. Except life has a funny way, I have found, of the difficulties are going to find us. You don't have to go looking. The suffering is going to find you. Hopefully happiness finds you too. I hope it's a mix, but I think for all of us, I don't know anyone who claims that suffering can no longer find them. And it's kind of a little bit of an awkward way to talk about it, but it can feel like that. So then we have to work with what's there. And so during those times, we have to bring all the resources we have, and all of us know how to do this. Everyone here on this, as I look around and see the people, everybody who's in this particular group right now are experienced practitioners. One of the beautiful things of doing formal meditation practices is there's so many benefits that happen on so many levels. So we're training the mind to be less distracted, more steady. We call it concentration or samadhi. We talk about that all the time. Very, very important as a stabilizing force to help us meet our experience and let go. We talk about insight and strengthening the qualities of the heart, and all of these things that are important aspects of what we develop in meditation. Well, another piece, it's kind of an artificial way to tease these out, to talk about them, because they're all connected. But just the training to learn to be still, whether you're standing, walking is not physically still, but in your mind, doing walking meditation, standing, lying down, sitting, and just to be with ourselves is a tremendous training. And we all know that sometimes, especially when we can touch into some of these deeper places in ourselves, we get to find how just amazingly beautiful our hearts and minds can be. And it's really inspiring, not in an ego way, but just to really know that these beautiful places, I like the word beautiful, are really part of us and are accessible to us. Maybe we hadn't even realized how beautiful our hearts and minds could be, and it can be quite liberating. So in those times, it's easy and it feels good. But just as important and equally important are the places where it is hard and challenging, and that's when it's training us to learn how to be with something, even if it's difficult. And so hopefully, again, you don't pick the worst thing. That's why in meditation, I'm often suggesting that people make a point to bring as much ease in their bodies as they can. You don't have to sit in some special fancy posture, but find a position to get as much ease as your body will allow. And sometimes our bodies don't allow a lot, and then we need to work with that the best we can. So bring as much ease as we can. Many people find that by doing that, it helps the mind relax, and then it puts them in a good place then to be able to meet whatever comes, including when the difficulties inevitably come. And then it trains us to, and so just being within a mind that doesn't want to sit still for a while, and maybe what's it like to be with a mind that's a little restless, or what's it like when the body's aching a little bit, or maybe I'm a little hungry, and you don't have to make a big deal, but you'll have things like this, or I'm a little too warm or cold. Before you get up and move, take just a few moments, maybe a few minutes, or a few breaths, just to hang out with it. And then we start to train ourselves. How do I train myself to be with something? This is the letting go. And it's I think one of the phrases that gets used that I like a lot, they'll say, pain is unavoidable, suffering is optional. That's what we're pointing to. It's a little corny, but I think the point is well taken. Sometimes suffering is not optional. We have to recognize that. There's no question about that. Let's not be over naive about these things or overnight idealistic. Anyway, that'd be a whole place to go into, but I want to say that as clear as I can. Sometimes it's not like, oh, you just need to learn to let go. No, this is like way beyond my limit. Some of you may not have heard this. I use an example. I haven't used this for a long time, but when I first started meditating, it was about 50 years ago when I was 18. I was very idealistic. So I must have been 19 or 20 years old or something. I was a young kid, and I was totally into it. I went to the dentist to have a tooth filled. He was going to give me the Novocaine, give me the shot. And I said to the dentist, that's okay. Something like, I don't remember, but my memory of it is that I'm just going to stay here and be present with whatever sensations arise and pass away. Don't numb me up. He must have thought I was crazy. And I was so idealistic and I did it but it was so beyond my ability to let go around. It wasn't even close. It just blew me away. And all I did, the joke I make is that I often say that if that dentist is still around and still has that old dental chair, I bet the imprints of my hand gripping the hand rests are still in it, because I was just toughing it out. Well, what good did that do me? And it hurt, and it just blew me away. There's a lot of life that's way, way beyond what we can work with, right? For all of us. But what we're doing is we're slowly, or maybe not so slowly, expanding the circle that can wider and wider, so it can hold more and more of the experiences of our life, all the ups and downs. And so I know for myself, and I'm sure this is true for many of you, there are many experiences, many things, many aspects of myself that were way too much for me before and now are no big deal, because our skills grow and our ability to let go deepens. So going back to what I said before, I don't know how to let go, and I don't know how to tell someone to let go, but I think by just pointing towards it, talking about it, and then it's in the doing that we learn, right? So you just engage with it the best you can, and it just seems to be a wonderful way that life works, that through just being willing to show up with the idea of can I let go, and learning to rest in that stream of non-clinging evermore, ever more deeply, that the ability grows. And then we don't have to have all of these tips and techniques so much. More and more of the time, it's just we just know what to do, and we know how to do it, and it comes. So I think just staying in touch with our good intention, and then you can experiment. There's a lot of different succinct ways to hold the practice that sometimes can be useful. You can carry like a little mantra around and take an hour, part of a day, or a long time. Sumedho said he did this for 2 years. You take something like let go, let go, let go, and just try it on and carry that around, see what happens. And then the interesting thing is we have to look, the last thing I'll say is we want to look and see in the places where we are really able to let go, how's that feel? How is that for us? I can't recall a single time in which there was whatever was going on in my mind, and if I was actually able to let go in my mind around it, that life wasn't better. I can't think of a time like that. So you have to do the experiment yourself and give it a try and to look and see.